welcome to episode 90 of the CRICKETher Weekly. We're recording a little bit earlier this week. It's also been kind of a short week, so we recorded late last week. We recorded on Tuesday last week because we were on holiday last weekend, and it's Saturday today. So that dramatic thing that happened last night, we're not going to be covering today. But we are going to be talking about England's trip to Oman.
What are they doing there, Sid?
Well, they're staying warm apparently. So the England squad have gone on a training camp to the warm weather in Oman, leaving behind, sunny Loughborough possibly, but definitely very cold Loughborough, and get an opportunity to train outdoors ahead of the Ashes. So they've taken most of the England squad. We'll talk about who they have and haven't taken from the England squad. They've also added a couple of names that we perhaps were expecting or weren't expecting. They've added Charlie Dean. Mm-hmm. Charlie Dean played all 5 ODIs against New Zealand, so I think we were all expecting her to be included in England's Ashes squad, weren't we, Raf? Yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
And Maya Bouchier as well. I think that she also made her debut at the tail end of last year and is an up and coming player for the future kind of thing. So I don't think it's any surprise to see her there. But Kirstie Gordon as well. England have taken her too, Raf. She hasn't played for England since the Ashes here in 2019. She played in the Test match. That was her last England match. Were you surprised to see her on the list, Raf?
Yeah, well, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised because she's definitely earned it, hasn't she? She had a brilliant 2021 season. She was one of the leading bowlers in regional cricket. Took a hatful of wickets for Lightning. Lightning obviously had a bit of a mixed season, a bit up and down, but her performances were basically the highlight of their season. She also
stood in as captain for Lightning when Miss Bryce was unavailable due to Scotland commitments. So
she's done a bit of captaincy, but I will never forget the fact that our first match that we went to see in the 2021 season, and it was Vipers v Lightning at the Ageas Bowl, and she was bowling and she took some quite big scalps. Vipers did win in the end, I think, but she took some quite big scalps, and each wicket she was really celebrating with a and some other words that I'm not going to repeat on what is meant to be a family-friendly
Yeah, we don't want to have to click that explicit content button on YouTube, Raf.
And I remember interviewing Tammy Beaumont after the match as well, and Tammy Beaumont basically said I had to tell her to just calm it down a little bit.
She was like, remember, this is actually being broadcast via a live stream, so people can potentially hear what you're saying.
But I think that's great because it shows that she's really passionate about what she does. And obviously, perhaps losing that England contract did fire her up a bit and make her want to prove everybody wrong. So I'm not surprised on the basis of her performances. I'm perhaps a little bit surprised for a couple of reasons. And the first is because we had talked about the fact that we wondered if perhaps she was thinking that she might be building up towards going back and playing for Scotland again. They've got some big matches coming up potentially. It's still possible that they might qualify for the Commonwealth Games next year, and it's also equally possible that they might qualify for the World Cup in South Africa, the T20 World Cup in 2023.
Yeah, and there's got to be some temptation to going back and playing for them, and obviously we know that Kirstie remains a proud Scot in terms of her support for Scotland's rugby and football teams and things like that.
Yeah, and now that she's got the chance to play professionally in England, and she could do what the Bryces are doing at the moment and actually kind of play her professional cricket in England for a regional side and then go off and play for Scotland. But she's been included in the England squad and she's presumably quite keen to be possibly playing in the Ashes and or the World Cup in New Zealand. So good for her. I think it's brilliant. The other reason that I'm perhaps slightly surprised to see her included is because, the person who dropped her is the same person who's brought her back into the fold. It's coach Lisa Kiteley. She was the one who knocked her off the England contracts list a year or so ago, or 18 months ago, and said, I don't think that you're in my plans for my England team. And she's now brought her back in. she has had a good season. You could say, well, actually, coaches don't do that often enough. They don't admit when they're wrong, when they get it wrong often enough.
Yeah, a bit of flexibility is important, I think. And, the fact that actually she did have a very good season. She had her best season since 2018, in terms of the wickets that she took and her numbers. So I think it's arguable that gave her the kick up the behind that she needed to kind of push her game on and take it to another level. And Lisa Keightley's gone, yeah, you know what, you've responded in the right way, come on back. So it's great that she will definitely have an opportunity to fight for a place in Australia. One person who wasn't there, who is Eve Jones, isn't it, Raf? Now, Eve Jones is another person that's being talked about quite a lot in terms of potential selection for Australia. Do we think that she's going to be going to Australia? She hasn't been selected for this training camp. I think that probably means that she's not going to be in England plans, and I don't think that's a massive surprise. I think that England have got their kind of batting lineup pretty solid. They know who they want to take with them ideally, and I think that while it's a big difference bringing in younger players like Maya Bouchier, there's no doubt that Eve Jones had a better WBBL than Maya Bouchier, but as an older player, I don't think she's going to be part of England's main plans for the Ashes.
Well, can I say something here? I think that's actually a real shame. Sorry, you're talking and talking. And what I wanted to say something about Eve Jones, which is actually that what's the point of monitoring WBBL performances if you're going to select the person who had the slightly less good WBBL performance than the person who's actually had a really good WBBL performance. You've done some number crunching for Eve Jones, haven't you? And you've been looking at her performances in WBBL, and she's really come on. Her game, obviously it's her T20 game, has really come on in terms of yes, she's still doing that thing where she takes a few balls to get going, but she's overall batting at a higher strike rate, and she had a brilliant 2021 season. It just must be so frustrating for her, for everyone to just go, oh well, she's not in England's plans because she's 29 or however old she is. I feel a lot of sympathy for her, actually. I think that she should be in that training squad because she's earned it in WBBL.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she definitely did make progress in WBBL. She was definitely kind of... Her issue remains that she's got quite a low strike rate early on in her innings, and that can mean that she can be kind of inconsistent. But yeah, so is Elise Perry. But one significant thing is that she actually, she was getting her strike rate up above 100 by about 20 balls in WBBL, whereas it was taking 30 to 40 balls last summer in the 100 and in the domestic T20 competition. So she's definitely pushed on again, even from last summer to her performances in WBBL.
Now, I know you think that she should be included in the A squad, don't you?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that England should be looking at. Obviously, the A squad is going to be primarily, we'd think younger players, kind of up-and-coming players. That's certainly how Australia will use it, I think. And we'd like to see the likes of Alice Capsey and Grace Scrivens given their opportunities to go out there and be part of that. And there's plenty of other players as well that all the younger players with regional contracts will be hoping they'll be getting a call about that. Why would you take Eve Jones on that? Well, I think that as a sort of senior player, potentially even as the captain of that squad, what do you think, Raf? Someone that you could make captain of that squad?
Yeah, absolutely. She's clearly popular with the players, and I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want somebody who is batting the way that she is and who has that experience and would be able to impart that to some of the younger players.
Yeah, a sort of mentor role in that A tour. So I'd like to see her, if she's not involved in England's main squad, I'd like to see her involved over the winter in that capacity. That would be great, I think, and a positive thing, and the right thing to do. I don't think there's any reason to do it apart from it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Right, now there's still so much to talk about at this Oman training camp because, well, a couple of people who aren't there from the main England squad. Katie George is unfortunately still injured, so she played in a lot of matches in the 100 last year, but was batting down the order and didn't bowl, and she's still under an injury cloud. She hasn't now played for England for how long is it, Raf? Sort of 3 years.
I think it's 3 years.
And she's obviously still struggling, and that's a pity to see. And it's obviously a really tough time, and we're starting to get to the point where it's been really a long time that she's been under this cloud. So I really hope that next season she's able to come through it and actually get some proper matches and some proper cricket. And the other person that's missing because she is resting, in the words of England's England's semi-official release, that resting Sophie Ecclestone. What's she actually resting from, Raf?
Your guess is as good as mine, Sid. It's a strange turn of phrase. Obviously, everyone had a long and exhausting season, the longest season of their careers. By the end of September, by the end of that New Zealand series, everyone was very, very happy to be able to go off and have a bit of holiday and a bit of a rest. They've obviously now been brought back together, firstly in Loughborough, and now the rest of them have been sent off to Oman, and Ecclestone's been left behind. I just sense that we're not really getting the full story here. It's possible that she does have an injury niggle. The ECB were very keen to clamp down on rumours during the New Zealand series that she'd had problems with her shoulder ever since bowling a very, very long spell in the test against India at Bristol, which was the first event of the summer in June. And we know that she'd sort of struggled a little bit in some of the subsequent matches to take wickets and to be as productive as she normally is for England. And Alex Hartley then, who is obviously her captain at her region, the Thunder, went on the radio.
So you think that Alex Hartley would know?
Right, exactly. Went on the radio and said, "Oh, she's got a bit of a sore shoulder and she's struggling a bit," and that's what happened. And that happened in the test. And the ECB then said, "No, that's total nonsense. She's absolutely fine." So is it that she's got an injury niggle and they don't really want to say? Well, I think they need to be a bit more transparent. It's possible that there's something more going on with her personally that we don't know about, of course. But I think that if that's the case, they should just they should not tell us what it is, because it's not really any of our business. But I think that the idea of just saying, "Oh well, we've left our best bowler behind," despite the fact that we obviously want her to play a central role in the Ashes and the World Cup, but we just decided she's not going to come on this training camp because she's resting. It just doesn't make any sense. It's just illogical. And it's like that the ECB think that we're a bit stupid sometimes. They think that we're not going to sit here and question that and just go, "Oh, okay, that's fine." Well, we are questioning it because that's what we do, because we're journalists and we want to know what's really going on. So, of course, we absolutely wish Sophie Ecclestone all the best, and I really hope everything's fine with her. But I think that the ECB should be a bit more transparent, basically.
Okay. Well, also this week, some other big news that was, actually rather strangely not announced by the ECB. It came out via leaks to Cricinfo. Is pay in the 100, and it's actually kind of some very good news that the ECB weren't. You sort of thought it would be a good time for the ECB to be bringing out some good news. So women's salaries in the 100. Well, what's happened to them, Raf?
Well, after the announcement by Tom Harrison several months ago that there was going to be some good news forthcoming, we finally got some news. Although, as you say, it's kind of been released in quite a strange manner, via the back door, really. So women's salaries, essentially, at all levels, have doubled. So the minimum that you'll earn for playing in the 100 next year as a woman will be £7,500. And the maximum will be £31,250, plus a captain's bonus for the 8 women's captains. So
you could earn almost 35 grand if you were at the top of the tree. So, and there's one very, very significant little thing in there, is that the top women are now going to be earning more than the bottom men. I think that was a thing that a lot of people commented on last year, how the bottom paid men, and there were a handful of men that didn't play any matches at all, how they earned more money from the 100 than the top paid women. So that's changed this year, and a substantial increase. It is important to recognise that there is still a huge discrepancy between the men's and the women's salaries. So the men are still eating by far the largest slice of the pie. The men are eating about 3/4 of the pie. The women are eating about 1/4 of it. The men have also had a pay rise. So the top salaries for the men are going up, as are the bottom salaries by something. That winds up being about 10%, because it's the amount that was cut as a result of the sort of COVID things that were brought in last year. So the top men are still going to be, earning like the best part of 100 grand more than the top women, and the bottom men earning about the same as the bottom women. The men's salaries actually, if you want to look at it negatively, the men's salaries have gone up more in absolute terms. So, Owen Morgan's pay rise is far more in absolute terms, in actual pounds in his pocket, than Heather Knight's pay rise. But credit where it's due. And is this the kind of money? Because what we talked about, Raf, is are the ECB offering the kind of money that will get the likes of Elise Perry and Meg Lanning, who are very well remunerated by Cricket Australia? Will they get out of bed for this kind of money? I think that the answer to that's probably a positive one, Raf.
Yeah, it's certainly a much more attractive option than it was in the inaugural 100. Obviously, we don't know what the situation would have been had we not been in the middle of COVID, because that was kind of used by some of these players as the reason why they didn't come. But obviously, the greater the financial inducement, the more likely people are to take those risks in the middle of a pandemic to come. So I do think that it's a much more attractive option. I think it's going to be more attractive anyway because the first tournament was such a success in terms of the crowds. I've said this before on the podcast that I think that people, that players, the world's best players will want to be playing in it because it's so rare for them to be playing in front of crowds of 15,000 people regularly. So I think that in itself will be a fillip for people to come. Overall, it's we welcome it. We obviously welcome it, but we have to get the balance right between welcoming it and going, okay, but there's still quite a long way to go. And actually, is it a bit disappointing that this was seen as kind of one of the biggest successes for women's cricket, and yet it's still the men who are gaining more than the women? It just seems a bit like it's kind of one step forward, two steps back somehow. In the sense of the kind of overall philosophy of everyone said after the tournament, the women really made the 100, and yet it's still the men who are getting a bigger pay rise. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and to be fair, Beth Barrett-Wild, who's the head of the 100 women's competition for the ECB, did tweet that she accepted there was still a long way to go, but we're making steps in the right direction. So credit where it's due, I think. Okay, well, that's all we got time for this week. We will see you back here again next week for episode 91. We're marching on towards that big 100th birthday party in 10 weeks' time. Take care, have a good week. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.